Hi, I'm Abigail Tyrrell from Raven Dreams Luxury Plus Size Lingerie, and this is Tips and Tricks. We're talking about lace and how to use lace in underwear. So anyway, this is a piece of lace that I have that's just extra. It came from something else, and I want to be able to use as much of it as possible. So what I have is I'm going to be using it for, I've got the modern pattern here, which I've put into acetate so that I can see through the pattern piece to be able to see what kind of, where I would get a motif out of, where would be the best use of my fabric. So I've got the modern piece here, and if I were to align it along the top to where it might, hit at the waistband, and then I can see if I can fit all of this or most of this motif into it. And the answer is no, because my pieces come outside of the fabric. So I'm going to flip it over and see if I can get what I can use out of this side. So I can get part of a motif either way, or I could get bits of the motif here. I can try and move it down the fabric to where I have at the edges to see how much of this motif I could get into it. And that's kind of okay, but you can see that we're getting a kind of a framing effect, and that will be a framing effect around the badge, which might be nice, it might not be nice. And we're getting little bits of the top in, which may or may not be desirable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this version, which is the vintage, and again, we can't use it this way because it's too much. And I'm going to turn it around and see, yep, there we have it on the edge to edge, and I can get all of that motif in. I can move it down a little bit, and because I put the center line in, I can see exactly where I need to align it up to see, okay, where am I going to get this piece out of? So this is good because I can cut, I'm right on the edge of here, so I want to push it up a little bit further, see if I can get as much out of it as possible. So now I have this full circle, this diamond, and both of that wave and flowers into it. And when I cut along, these bits here have very little sequins or beading, so it will make it much easier to remove those before I start sewing. And this is ideal, so I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to use the vintage mid-rise panty pattern. So I have cut out my pattern pieces, and I've laid out my lace to see how it's going to look, and then I've also cut out a bunch of the motifs from the remaining lace and laid them out to see how I might use them. So I put two of the flowers here at the top, where there might be a bare spot, and some of the smaller flowers on the side so I can extend the lace going outwards, and then just a bit of cuteness at the back. When I started to create this panty, I was using bits of the lace that I'd cut out and then placed to make it more interesting for the rest of the knickers, to kind of like move that lace into the rest of it. But then I discovered that I didn't have any lilac elastic to go around it, so the whole idea of it being one tone was going to have to go out of the window during COVID. What I did have was some really beautiful red elastic, and I also had this lace in red, lucky me. So instead, what I decided to do is that I would switch it up. Where are we got here? And instead, start using the red pieces and interspace them in with the purple ones, with the lilac ones. And kind of give it more color. I'm usually really lame about color and I'm very subtle in how I use it. So this is a big up change for me, and I'm really excited about it. Okay, the next thing you need to do is transfer your bits of lace to your fabric. And I use this stuff. I mean, spray stick stuff, repositional fabric spray. It's fantastic. You can then pin it afterwards, but frankly, all of this, oh, you have to do so much, and I don't have the time for all that shit. I really just don't. So what you do is you give it a good shake, and then just make sure that you've got a piece of paper that you don't really care all that much about, and give it a good glue. You need to let it dry a bit. Make sure you do it on the right side that you're trying to stick it to. And seriously, give it at least 30 seconds to dry, otherwise it's too wet and too sticky and really horrible. Here I have one of my side pieces, and I'm going to start to play with it and decide what I want to do and where I want things to go. So I've got these tiny motifs in purple, and I know that I only have so many of them, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking, do I want it up, do I want it down? These are just tacky, they're not completely wet. So when I place them, they're going to stick, but you're also going to need to like maybe hold them down with a pin when you start to sew. But at least it gives you the ability to go, you know, where do I want it? So I want something more like here. And see, it's right there. It's ready to sew. And then you have, I'm going to take a larger red one, taking off the here. Do I want it the same direction? Do I want it not the same direction? Where do I want to try to put it? I'm going to put it there. I'm going to see and play around with the distribution, and if I don't like it, I'm going to go like, you know what, I'm going to have it over here instead. And it still sticks. Yay! So when you move something, you don't have to go, oh my god, everything's gone everywhere, I've got pins everywhere. You can just start playing with it. Because they really do stick down, you can begin to sew right away. You can see that I've stuck down, but they are not entirely and completely, you know, stuck down onto the fabric, my motifs. They're just enough to keep them there for as long as I need it to. It's not completely glued, it's just tacked on. And what I've done is I'm using this clear monofilament, both in the bobbin and on the main seam, and I am using, if you're on a Janome, the stitch length is 2, and the stitch width is 2 and the stitch length is 2.5. So I'm going quite narrow but also quite long. What I'm trying to do is tack around the edges and get this thing down. I'm not trying to sew it down hard. I'm trying to make sure that it's there permanently. Now a lot of companies don't do this. They don't stitch anything down, or if they do, they use they hand sew it on with big long stitches in between. And that's not going to keep it on your underwear any kind of washing length. So using a monofilament, using this clear thread is the way to go. And doing it loosely is good. Now you're going to want to work really slow and lift your foot and turn the fabric every chance you get. So we're kind of there. We're at the point, I don't know if you can see it, we're at a joint of a leaf. So we're going to go a little bit in and take a stitch, then we're going to turn it and take a stitch and look and see where we are. We're going to turn it a little bit like that, take a stitch, turn it again. Look, we're trying to keep it as flat as possible. You're not stretching anything, and you're being really careful about how you're doing this. Taking your time is the real key. Those of you who have machine embroidery feet and know how to use them really well, or a sewing machine that does machine embroidery, this is going to be just a piece of poo for you. But for people like me who don't do this all the time, take it slow, watch what you're doing, be prepared with your seam ripper to undo all your hard work. So here we go, going around. I know kind of where this is going, but I'm going to look underneath. Yep, I want to go out a little bit. And I'm going to lift it again. I'm going to get to that point on the leaf there. Again, it's just a stitch at a time. It is a bit fiddly, but it depends on what you're trying to do as well. And if this is small and tiny, and I'm just showing that you can do it, and you can do it well. You don't have to be a massive pro who's been to, no, that's too far, to school to do this. You can do it on your own. Just take your time. And what do they say? Practice, practice, practice. Okay, I have my pieces cut out for the vintage panties, and I've done my applique and I've dealt with my lace. So what I've got here is the side bits and the back and the front. As you can see, I'm using a bit of lace that is tulle based. Now tulle does stretch. It does have a bit of stretch to it, but what it also is incredibly delicate. It's strong in some senses, but it can be ripped. It can get, you know, torn quite easily if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. So having it alone on itself is very pretty, and I'll be doing some work with tulle that I do just that in the future. But for right now, if you want a durable pair of knickers that you can hand down to others as, you know, kind of vintage, proper vintage lingerie for the future as well, you really want to back it. So I'm using this Power Net, which I love, which is really soft and silky and stretches and is incredibly durable and partially see-through. So it's still going to be really sexy, but it's going to give this tulle a really lovely firm backing that's going to protect it over time. Okay, now we're going to come to start joining it together. I've got this piece here, which is the side piece that makes up the full front of the panty. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it so that it's right sides together with the front, and then I'm going to align it up properly. Watch what I'm doing. Make noises to yourselves, folks. And then I'm going to put the backing piece of this onto it as well. So what we're going to do eventually is we're going to make an invisible seam, and we're going to basically bag this out. For those of you who know what bagging out means, great. For those of you who don't, I suggest Google, but it's making an invisible seam and making a bag out of something. So we're going to just do this like that. I'm going to pin it together, and then I'm going to sew it. So I've got my pieces pinned, and I'm just going to baste it together, because I like to baste things together because it makes sure that when you go to the next stage, which is either to use a zigzag or to use a serger, it means that it's really together. It's not going to shift the layers, and you can then trim it off later. So it's in there, and it just keeps everything nice and neat. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm putting this on just a regular basting stitch, but it's kind of large, so I'm putting it at a 3/0. And as you can see, I'm just going through it. People ask me, how wide is your seam allowance? Because it's a little bit variable. Let me just want to move this better so you can actually see what I'm doing. And that is just the width of a normal foot. So it's about a ½ centimeter. It's not very big. It's just that width, and you just glide through it. Again, when you have really small sizes, it's absolutely essential that you get all of these measurements absolutely millimeter perfect. But for plus size, you can be a little bit more generous and a little bit more experimental as well. So I'm just going to make sure this is flat. If that's not flat, I'm going to readjust it, because you can do that anytime you want, and go through it. And I'm going to show you the result here, which is, this will be what it looks like. I'll be trimming off the middle of that seam, and you'll see what the next stitches are, but voila, here it goes together. What I love about basting is that the first time I did this, I cocked it up. So I was able to remove the stitches, which are quite visible on this side, and it still protects the delicate fabric on the other side as well. So when we turn it over, this is what it looks like. So what I'm going to do for the next piece is I'm going to match it up. I just dropped a pin on the floor. The way it's supposed to go, which is like this, and then you get the full panel, and flip it over, and then take the rest of it. Yes. Oh fuck. drives me nuts, this does. Okay, it's like this. So I'm going to pin it on the side it's supposed to be. Yay! And I'm going to take this, I'm going to put this in the middle so it's out of the way, and I'm going to pin it like that. Okay, you can see here I've got all the pieces lined up, and it's going to meet at the top corner right there at the very top, and this bit is pulled over, and now I'm just going to tack it again. Okay, line it up, release that thread because it was in the way. Sure, I've got everything where I need it to be, and tack. Seems like I've got a little bit of stress on the foot, so I'm going to release it and make sure that this isn't pulling. And let it go. There we go. Okay, I've serged my seams, and now I'm going to turn it inside out. Because this is such a delicate fabric, what I want to do is make sure that it has extremely, that it's just not going to tear the tulle at the seam there. So as I pull it out, see, you've got the seam there underneath it, and I'm going to slightly disguise it, and it's going to become part of the actual work itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 3-stitch zigzag on top of this to make this seam strong and to slightly disguise what's going on underneath. And plus it'll make it a lot flatter. So that, and whoops, I put my sewing kit on top of my petal, which is not a good thing. Okay. So here we are with a 3-stitch zigzag on top to disguise the seam and to make it stronger, so it's not just on the one line of tulle that all of the stress goes. So here we go. So I don't really want the zigzag to go into the side panel. I just want it to stay right on top of the tulle. That way it'll make it flatter and it'll sit, much better. And then I'm going to go and do the other side. Woo! Way! See, and you have this nice point at the top for your vintage pattern. Vintage panties. I'm just teasing it apart slightly. You could iron it beforehand, but I prefer this way because you're going to get it really right up along that edge, where with an iron you could kind of be pushing it over a little bit. So I could use an industrial machine for this, but I prefer not to, mainly because I want to take my time with my sewing, especially when you're working with very delicate fabrics, as opposed to just, shoving it through. It just gives you that much of a better finish. And so now we have it all as one piece. So now we can start working with it just like we would for a normal set of knickers. So we go back to the Jane instructions to finish it off. And here is the finished example of the vintage panties, front, side, and back. The modern version, why I call it modern, is that it has a front panel, which you'll see in most knickers that have that kind of control area first, or it'll be a big satin color and then a looser color, contrasting color around the back and sides. So what I have here for this is just another variation or something else that you can do other than just put the plain modern together. Is what I have is it's a power mesh, but unlike the power mesh I've used before, you can see it's incredibly fine weaved, and it's also stronger. It doesn't stretch as much, and it's a little bit thicker. So what it is, it's like control area that you find in girdles or in other knickers, so that it'll help smooth you out at the front. So that's my control front. And what I also have here is one of my favorite patterns of our pieces is a lovely stretch, and I call it my Alice in Wonderland or Red Queen because it has a lot of red roses and abstract on the front. So we're going to use that as well as some velour, some red crushed velvet. So here we go. That's the back. Oh yes, and also on the back we're going to do a ruched back as well for the knickers. So that's what we decided to do. We're doing a modern with red crushed velour sides, the red in the front, and a power control panel behind, and so on and so forth. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is make the front panel piece. And in order to do that, we take the area of the modern, this is the crutch area, and we're going to do the sides together. So here is one of the red side seams, and I'm going to put it sandwiched in between these two layers. Give me a second. Okay, now I've got my right sides of the red of the printed fabric and the red velour together, and my control fabric underneath. And now I'm going to do is I'm just going to baste them together. So on a very loose stitch, people have asked me what my seam allowance is, and frankly I just use the width of my foot. It makes me more comfortable. On some patterns you must be absolutely to the 1/10 of a millimeter perfect, but with plus size you got a little bit of give. So here we go, we're just going to baste it. Now what's going to happen is when I serge the seams, I'm going to put the serger line straight in the middle of that, so the two needles go either side of that line. And then, once it's serged, finish this off. See, I'm not even starting or ending it, it's just a base stitch. Once it's serged and it's got a final professional finish on it, I'm going to stretch this until it cracks, until it makes a visible cracking sound. And that's when the threads of here will break apart, and then it will have just the main threads of the serger holding it together. But this just makes it really easy to make sure you're doing the right thing first, and if you're using expensive fabrics and you cock it up, you can take it apart much more easily. Another note to add is make sure that all of your pieces, especially when you're using velvets or something with a nap or a stripe, all go the same way when you're cutting it out. Otherwise you'll get patches of light and dark and it'll be really awkward. Just not like I did with the back piece when I cut it out the first time. No. Okay, now I pinned the other side, and you can see that the two side piece panels that go with the modern front are inside of the power mesh. It's inside of this control layer. Fingers. And what I'm going to do is baste it again and then turn it inside out. This is a process also known as bagging out. So here we go, we're just going to, again, baste this. Whee! Okay, and we turn it inside out. And this is before I've serged it. I just want to show you that now we have, you can see it through there, the full front piece. That way. Yeah. See? And the seams are now invisible. But I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to go serge those and then turn it back inside out, and then we're going to have a nice piece to work with. Okay, bringing you right back to camera, I'm just showing you the seam again, and you can see that there is another line of sewing buried in there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack the seam. And you heard it crack. And that means it can stretch more now. And it's mainly using the serger threads to hold it together and not that just basted thread. Now to do the ruched back. So you've got your piece out here, and you've got, and open it up so that it's on the wrong side, and with your piece, mark very carefully with something that isn't going to leave a stain. Use tailor's chalk, your center back seam. Make sure you do a nice neat line, not like I'm doing here. It's fun using this stuff, isn't it? Yep. Now you've got your center back line. You have your guide for sewing. Now you have your elastic. You don't really only need that much, so I'm just going to cut some just to make it a little bit more easy for you. You're going to need about between 6 to 8 inches. Notice that it is incredibly thin stuff. So this is less than ½ centimeter, and it's really important that you have it small but wide enough that you can put a stitch into. So on the back, got my line here. I'm going to start my elastic a little bit beyond, and just like forever normal, I'm just going to get those first couple of stitches in. I'm going to do it the other way around because the pile goes in this direction, so this way it will actually run. Okay. Otherwise it's sticking. So I've got it right on that center line. And I'm going to use a zigzag. Okay, a really tiny one just inside of the elastic itself. So you're going to check your elastic, but on a Janome I am a 1.5. I'm going to move that actually up to a 2.0, and the stitch length is 2.0 as well. I'm just going to start it off. Okay, I realize that I'm going to want to adjust where that is because it's going off the elastic. Okay, try it again. And so I'm going right down the middle. So I've just started that, that's just within the seam. Now I'm going to want to hold this and really pull it tight, not absolutely tight, but not the gentle stretch that you use for the other picot and fold over elastic. You want to give it a little bit more because this is going to create that ruching, that puckering. If you think you want to put a gather stitch on it, imagine as soon as you try to pull up your knickers, those threads are going to break. So these ruches need something to be anchored to really well and follow along right down that seam. So also I've got a black top thread, and I'm using a matching thread to this as the bottom thread so that you won't see the black thread stitches on the other side. So here we go. Actually, I'm going right down the middle. I'm going slowly, making sure I'm keeping straight. You can pin it, but frankly, pinning it isn't going to do any good for you at this point because you're doing it quite tough. If you can grab it from behind, then you can just gently pull it through, and you can guide it a little bit better too. Stop. I'm going to check my direction. I'm going to put that stretch on, and you can see that it's already ruching up. I'm going to stop, check, put it on. Because I'm reckless, I'm going quickly. Right, and stop. Now, Looks like this on the inside, and here you have, unfold it, your ruched back on the outside, and you're just ready to use it like any other pattern piece in the Jane range of the back. So here it is ready to go, and it'll stretch with you and ruche up when it's not. Woohoo! Onto the gusset. I've got the right side of the front panel pinned to the right side of the front gusset, and then I have the wrong side, the right side of the internal gusset pinned to the wrong side of the inside. So that would be the wrong side of the power nut, the wrong side of the other fabric if you weren't having this control area. Okay, and now I'm going to do is I'm going to baste it together. It just makes for a better conceived garment. It means that if there's any kind of puckering or anything like that, you can, you know, regulate things out before you have to do anything. So, yep, here we go. And I know that my control area and the red velvet were being bitchy, so I basted the internal ones together before I came to this part. So here we go. What we have is now an internal seam that's hidden. We're going to baste, again, we're going to take that over and serge it, serge the inside, and then crack the seam just like I have before to give it, make it a stronger connection. But first, before I'm going to do that, I'm going to connect the back. Now this is kind of fun. Okay, we have the back seam here and the front of the garment. So what we need to do is we need to take the right side of the back and pin it to the right side of the front so that you can see that it's here. Yep, all the way along. Be back in a second. Okay, so as you see it, I have the front part of the knickers, the bridge from the gusset to the back, all correctly pinned together like this, so that we have the right sides together in the back. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to shake that out flat so that you can see the bridge that this is on the inside and the other piece. Right, this is the fun bit, and if you want a better demonstration of this, go see my tutorial called The Fucking Gusset, and that will show you how to do it. Some people like to burrito their gussets, which I find to be really rather titillating but and hilarious, but me, I just flip it. So we have the inside here, which is the wrong side, and the wrong side, but we need to get that around. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take these sides and we're going to twist them. Okay, see that my hands are just going like this. I'm going to take one corner right there and immediately pin it. It's together, and as you can see, it does look like you've got your knickers in a twist right there, but don't worry about it. I'm going to pin the opposite corner. It's going to work out fine, and then I'm going to do the middle, make sure everything's perfect. And now I'm ready to sew. It does look like a dog's dinner. Your knickers are in a twist. Do not worry about it. Don't give it a second thought. Go straight and baste this puppy. So that's what we're going to do. Make sure everything's fine. It's lined up. I like to stretch it a little just to put a little tautness on it so that I'm aware that everything is flat, and if it isn't, I can take a look and see if it needs adjusting somewhere, because, you know, sometimes it does. Velvet especially is very difficult to like make it happy, especially if you're going against a grade at any point. This should not be it. This should be fine. And we're basted. And now what we do is we take this seam, which we've just sewed, we flip it over, and suddenly you have an invisible seam in your knickers. Ta-da! In the t-shirt tutorial, I showed you how to put on fold-over elastic. I'm doing this again. I'm using fold-over elastic on these pair of knickers, and what you can see I've done is I've serged the edge. So I've taken out any abnormalities in the line itself, and I've just trimmed it all neat and smooth. And what this also does is that this is a velour velvet. Yeah, it's plastic, but it's also made with a pile of fluff, and you can get a fluffy edge to it, which is difficult to hold inside of anything. And when you're using a fold-over elastic, you're using a 3-stage wide zigzag, which means you may not catch the top of everything all the way along. So what I like to do is I like to cut the 4th thread on my serger, or the outside outermost, and just give it something more to grab onto when it's sewing than the fuzzy edge of a bit of velvet, which is fraying a little bit. So in order to do that, just cut that off. No way. Yes, the elastic was in my teeth. And fold this over, take it to the machine, get it pre-lined up, and fold over the elastic, making sure that it's well under, and I've got a bit of a tail that will make it easier for the machine to start on, and it won't just suck it straight into the needle void there. So, yep. Perfect. Come on, get in there. It's curling up on the lip a little bit, so I just want to make sure that I've knocked that flat. Push that in, turn that on. And so, yep, I'm using a 3-stitch zigzag, which is pretty much the width of the elastic folded over. So here we go. And I want to make sure it's in. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this flat. I don't want this to stretch at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little gentle stretch on this. You don't want to do too much, or it will distort the elastic itself on the knickers, and it'll be really uncomfortable. You don't want to not stretch it at all, or stretch this and not that. What you'll get is a ribbon effect, and it means that, you know, the elastic is stretched out when it shouldn't be, or not stretched out when it should be. So what you want to do is you want to put a little bit of tension on it, not a lot, but a bit. It's going to give the knickers a bit of shape, and just hold it all really well together, and also help to keep it on you too. Yep, and there we go. Now I'm going to just go through this because I'm going to speed this up on the video because otherwise it's just really boring. When you put your side seams together, once you've done your leg seams, your leg elastic, what I do is I pin them. I just put a pin right there, make sure that they match exactly where I want to sew them, and then when I put them in the feet, they don't spread apart or gap, which is really makes it look really unprofessional and horrible as well. So we're just going to take it, and again, I'm just going to baste this, but I'm going to go back and forth over that opening with a straight stitch because I want to nail that down. I don't want that spreading or breaking ever. So just to start that off, a bit more close to the edge where I want it. There's my petal. I'm just going to go back and forth. Just a couple of stitches back and forth, a couple of times, because I don't ever want that to break. On the dark side of that, if you do fuck it up, it's going to be a pain in the ass to unpick it all. Then again, that's why I use the pin. Okay, that's basted and ready to go into the serger. Or if you have, if you're doing this by zigzag, what you can do is do this seam, and what it's called, and what they do in the industry as well is they spread it open and then they zigzag on the inside so that it goes across both layers, and then when that seam cracks, it's got the zigzag on the inside that will hold it together and allow it to stretch, again, pretty well without breaking, but you will see gaps in the fabric. Okay, I'm just going to show you the leg endings. Where'd they go? Yeah, on the side seams. As you can see, because I pinned that and I really held it together, It's a perfect match. And just all I have to do is trim off this, and I'm done with that. And I've done it on the other side as well. So I've also gone around the top edge just to give it a smooth, make sure that everything was smooth all the way along, and to give the fold-over elastic something to hang on to. So when you're starting to do a waistband, what you want to do is to cut a V into it so that, I'll show you on this one, you'll have seen the picture. That way at a 45-degree angle. So when you start to sew it, it gives you a least amount of bulk, and you'll do the same thing in the same direction on the elastic coming the same way so that it fits together seamlessly when you get to the side of your waistband. So I'm going to do this just like I did the legs, and then basically it's finished. So I like to start out on the right hand side of the body. I don't know why, it's just a thing. Because I put tags on the left. No, on the left hand side of the body, because you put tags on the right hand side for underwear. And I don't like a lot of bulk, so, or things being in the way. Again, I've got that point there. I'm just going to smooth it over to make sure it stays flat. And just like before, I am going to start it. And I'm going to hold it there while I make sure it's properly under and properly going in the right way. Again, I'm going to give it just a little bit of a stretch. And you can see it coming out the other side where it is got that notch there, and you'll see how it'll fit in the end. Again, we're going to speed this up. Sorry about the last time you didn't see the whole leg, because basically the battery died. So I had to go and get something else. Okay, I'm at the point where I'm needing to trim off the rest of this elastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it to where I think it should be. It's going to match up, give it a bit of that, pull out my scissors, pull a little bit past it, and cut it. And then, just manipulating with my fingers, I'm going to do the end. Lift it up, make sure we're going in nicely. And then go backwards and forwards. Ta-da, done. I'm going to have to unpick that and do that again. And here are the completed knickers. And here is the finished example of the modern panties. Front, side, and ruched back. You wouldn't guess it, but all of these are the same size. My size, but none of them match up to be the same size. They all have different measurements, and none of them fit. Not the same way on the same bra twice, which is just crazy. So this is my next project. Stay tuned.